I wanted to start with, so I don't really do introductions. I just like talking, but I wanted to start with how we met. I love the story of how we met.
We met at yoga.
5 years ago?
It must have been.
Must have been 5 years ago. Mike's Hot 26, my favorite yoga class at Quantum.
Yeah.
He's so awesome.
Quantum Health and Yoga in Burlington. I love that class.
Yeah.
And I love that he works out with us. So.
And I think that you hadn't been there for a while.
Maybe. Yeah.
Because I was going a lot right then, and I think I didn't recognize you, and we were both first, and so we just struck up a conversation. And I don't know how you brought up that you were an author.
I don't remember that either.
Maybe I said I
taught. You said you were a teacher,
right?
And I think the grade level that you taught came up in conversation.
Yeah.
And I said I had written The Lost Hour, which was a children's book for perfectly geared towards third graders, but I do presentations from kindergarten through 5th, 6th grade,
right?
And talk about the book and how I came to write it and everything. And we were just chatting, and I mentioned it, and I said, if you ever want me to come to the classroom, I'd love to read to the children. That's one of my favorite things to do, actually.
Yeah.
Is read aloud to children.
Yeah.
And I just did Read Across America at the Concrete Elementary School.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And you read the book?
No, I didn't read that book. I read Andrea Beatty's Rosie Revere Engineer, which is a STEM book.
Oh, it's a series. I've seen those.
Right. And they're very, very good. And what I like more than anything in them is the encouragement to keep trying. Right. And then I had just found a book by a British author, actually.
Do you mind pulling your mic a little bit closer, if that's okay? Thank you.
By a British author who wrote a poem about a little girl who kept being given mixed messages. Right? When she was sad, they told her to cheer up, but when she was happy, they told her to calm down. When she was energetic, they told her she was too much. When she was lazy, they told her she was too little. That kind of thing. It wasn't, I'm paraphrasing. Anyway, it gets to a place where the little girl goes to the forest and talks to the trees. And they don't say anything. They just let her breathe.
Wow.
And it's this wonderful poem. And the woman had posted it in honor of Women's International Day, which was March 8th. International Women's Day, I guess it's called. And which happened to coincide with National Forest Day.
Wow.
And so she posted this poem, and I read it and ordered 2 copies of the book. One for the Concrete School Library and one to read to the children. And it just so happened the other presenter there was Laura Pennington, who is an Upper Skagit elder. And she told 2 native stories, which were wonderful. And we dovetailed into each other perfectly, you know. So I ended up giving her the other copy of the book.
That's awesome. And what was the name of the book?
Breathe.
And it's a poem.
It's a
poem.
Book. It's just a long poem.
Oh, it's one poem.
It's one poem about a little girl that it's written in verse. Is basically the story.
Yeah.
Little girl that couldn't make herself fit, couldn't do what people seemed to want of her because they kept changing their minds, what they wanted from her.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So I read that one too.
Yeah.
You know, I think I could have read The Lost Hour because it was just right around daylight savings time. But I'm always a little shy to do that, you know, to be too pushy with my own work.
And remind me again, who was the illustrator for that book?
The Lost Hour was illustrated by Maya Keegan, who was 9 years old when she started the illustrations.
Wow.
She was 13 when she finished them. She went from that to illustrating a book called A Dog in the Big Courthouse for Me, which we wrote and illustrated as a donation to Courthouse Dogs Foundation. And they put dogs, facility dogs, in the courthouse to help victims of abusive crimes testify when their perpetrators often in the room with them.
Wow.
So oftentimes it's children who don't want to sit opposite somebody who has done something abusive and talk about them. And so the dog goes in and calms the child down. And they do a phenomenal thing. And ever since they started doing it in King County, they have traveled the world and promoted the use of dogs in courthouses. And to help them raise money, we wrote this book.
Wow. Is that the first time anyone's ever done this, like in King County? Do you feel like
as far as I know,
it?
yes. In fact, Ellen O'Neill Stevens, who is the founder of Courthouse Dogs, she had a child with cerebral palsy and got him a comfort dog when he graduated high school, so that people would be drawn to talk to him out in the street because of the dog. He'd have company, and she started seeing the impact of the dog on her son Sean and also the people around her, and said she was a prosecuting attorney in King County at the time, and told her boss that she thought they would be good for the courthouse, and the boss said no at the time. And then one day she had to stop at work to pick up some papers. She wasn't even working that day. And she had Jeeta, the dog, with her. And there was a family of 5 children who had been serially abused and never spoken about it because they were terrified. And Jeeta just and they were in the prosecutor's office at that time. And Jeeta wandered over and sat with them, and they started to open up.
Wow.
And so the King County prosecuting attorney said, oh, yes, we need one of these in the courthouse.
Wow.
And it grew from there.
Wow, I had no idea. That's amazing.
You can find them on Facebook. They have a website, courthousedogs.org. Or maybe it's courthousedogsfoundation.org.
Yeah, I'll put all those links in the description. Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, and Maya did the illustrations based on photographs, and we had to write it a very specific way, so it did not seem like this was a teddy bear in the courthouse. This was a working dog, because that's what they are. And so we did that together, and now Maya is 21, I believe, and she's at the University of Washington, and she's illustrating a 3rd book for me, which is called The Impoliteness Bug. And it's about a little girl that gets bitten by the impoliteness bug. And so hopefully we'll have that out before the end of this year.
Yeah. Well, you know where to come. Come to my classroom. My kids
I would love
that.
to, yeah.
So we met in yoga. We mentioned the artist thing. And then I think the next time I saw you after you visited our classroom was at the Concrete Theater.
It
for
may
trivia.
have been. All that time went by.
Oh man, you saved me. I could not mark those questions fast enough. And Steve was very, really, very awesome. Your husband, very awesome comic relief. That was really fun.
Yeah, he enjoyed it. We both enjoyed it. We want to do it again whenever you're ready.
I know. Well, I'm going to be doing trivia on Wednesdays at the Hub this summer.
Okay.
I decided. My husband has softball on Thursdays, so he could never come unless the game was canceled. So I thought, okay, I'll do it Wednesdays. So Wednesdays at the Hub all summer. I'm really excited. Yeah,
cool. I can go to yoga and then come to trivia.
There you go. So we're at your studio. This is beautiful. I mean, I haven't even seen your actual studio, but just pulling in, I just love your sign.
Thank you.
I love your house. Like I just everything's so rustic, and when I pulled in, I was thinking, I wonder why they called it Sauk Mountain Studio. And then it's like, just look right there.
Yeah, it's Sauk Mountain Pottery because the mountain is right behind our house.
Yeah.
And is the inspiration for a lot of my husband's work, too. He's the potter, I'm the writer. Okay. And I do most of the sales for the pottery, too.
And how long have you guys had this?
My husband bought the property in 1975. There was nothing on it except a loafing shed for a cow.
Wow.
So he's built everything that you see here.
Yeah.
And then I met him in 1986. And we had a conversation at that time. I'm from England originally, and I was living in New York chasing theater because that was my first love. I was an actress.
What do you mean chasing theater?
Well, trying to get into theater, basically.
Okay.
And also learning about theater. So I lived in France for a short period of time, for 2 years. And during my time there, I got to work for the Performing Arts Center, essentially. And they had people from other cultures coming in and performing, like the Chinese opera would come, and the Kathakali theater would come, the Indian theater. And I realized then that was a great way to understand multiculturalism. And embrace it instead of reject it. And I grew up in the 70s in England, and it was pretty racist, and that bothered me. And so my dream was to go around the world looking at theatre in all different places, and then go back to England and open a theatre that would have multiculturalism as a mission.
Wow.
And along the way, I fell in love, and that was with my husband. And
so you met in New York?
No, we met out here. I came to visit my roommate's daughter. And she was part owner of Cascadian Farm at that time.
Okay.
And she brought me down here to take a sauna on a Sunday. We have a sauna, a wood-fired sauna at the back of our property. And at that time, the community could use it if they wanted to. And so we came down, and my husband was leaving the property at that time. And we met passing the garden and stood and had a conversation. And I told him that I was from Shearson Lehman American Express Brothers, and I was going to build a 60-story building in the pasture behind his house. And he was pretty panicked until he saw the twinkle in my eye. And then he said, oh, okay, I get it. So, yeah, we met in 1986. And
But you were from England.
I was from England.
So you had to do the whole visa thing to get here.
Yeah.
Which I know about since I'm Canadian. It's not fun.
No, and I had a visa. I came in on a visa and have written a little bit about the struggles to go through that. That
in a
change. Book? No, it's in a monologue.
Okay.
I write all sorts of things. I write monologues. I write short stories. I write books and plays. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but what happened was, we got to a place in our relationship where we talked about settling down and getting married, and we did, and then we got pregnant with our first child. And I thought, now what am I going to do theatrically? I was living all the way up here in the woods, and I was acting down in Seattle. I acted in The Secret Garden at the Seattle Children's Theatre and Red Square at the Seattle Rep and things like that. And anyway, I thought, well, if I write plays, I can play all the roles in my head, and I don't even have to go to auditions. So I started writing plays, and I was very fortunate in that Skagit Valley College, Andy Friedlander, who was director of the drama department at that time, read my plays and put them on stage.
Oh, wow.
Which is how you can progress as a playwright. If you're, the difference between reading the word on the page and hearing it in the mouth of an actor on stage is huge. Mm-hmm. And so I was just having this conversation with somebody a few nights ago about they'd gone to a play reading, and it was very repetitive. The actors kept hitting the same point again and again. And that's because the writer couldn't see it on the page. Mm. But you put it again in the mouth of a good actor, and you think, oh boy, that's the second time they've said that. even if it's reworded, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. So I grew, I believe, I hope, as a playwright because of my plays being produced at Skagit Valley College.
How many plays have you had produced there?
I had probably a half a dozen plays produced there.
Oh, wow.
And the last one that was produced there was Carried by the Current, which is based on the true story of a group of women from Texas that opened the first safe house for women back in 1870.
Wow.
And the actors that were in that production in 2010 stuck with me and the script, and we have gone around and performed it during Women's History Month, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, as a reading. And in 2019 they came to me and said, we want to do a production in Seattle. It's time. With the Me Too movement, people are understanding more and more that sometimes you just can't see this stuff from the outside. Mm. And so we would like to form a production company, and the production company is Women's Work Productions, and raise the money to put on the play via previews, where we would go and perform 2 or 3 scenes from the play and then talk about the story. I would talk about the story. And so we did that, and then COVID closed us down, right? And we came back to it with a couple of previews in 2021 and 2022, and we just got a $10,000 matching funds donation given to us for the production of the play.
Yeah.
And so we have to come up with the first 10, and we actually have most of that raised, but we're going to start afresh because sometimes it's easier for people to invest when they know there's a matching funds at the end of it.
Yes. Yeah.
And already that's proving to be the case.
Oh, awesome.
So we're hoping to do a production at the Snohomish County PUD auditorium, which is a little theater in Everett.
Oh, okay.
Because of COVID and people's reluctance to go back to the theater, we thought, well, maybe we'll start with a smaller location than
yeah.
And Everett's downtown art center has grown enormously. It's a really wonderful hub. If you've never been to Shack Art Center.
No, we have. We went, she did a class there. Remember you made a fairy door? Yeah.
It's a really great place.
Yeah.
It's got great art, and it's being very, very well supported. And
there's a performance space there?
No, there's not. We did a preview there.
Oh, okay.
But we're going to do it at the PUD building. That's what we're hoping. We've got.
Is there a date set for that?
We're hoping October or November of this year.
Okay. Yeah. I'll put the links to maybe where people could find out. Yeah. That's cool. Wow. See, I just thought you were just an amazing author.
and I don't know about that, but thank you. Yes.
That's awesome. And then you said you have 2 kids?
I do. 2.5, actually. I have a stepdaughter.
Okay.
And she lives in Portland. And then we have 2 children together. My son, Reed, who works for the Pottery now, part-time.
Oh, okay.
He makes pots and we sell them. And he also works for an organic farm in Birdsview. And then my daughter, Annie, who lives in Seattle, and like I said, she works helping people negotiate higher salaries.
That's such a fascinating job. But she started out like theater. So that led
She has a degree in theater and a minor in music. And I think if she could, she'd love to be, she loves marching band. So at one point she was thinking about being a marching band director at university level, but that requires a lot more education and potentially traveling across country for an internship. And she likes the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
And so she found this opening in a startup company to help people negotiate higher salaries, and finds that she really likes helping people.
Yeah.
People that aren't necessarily good at promoting themselves or talking about themselves or their value or worth. And she can help them. She can fortify them. And
that's great. Well, it might not only give them a better salary, but also help them in other areas of their life too. Give them that confidence boost they need.
Exactly. Many of them do come back and ask, "Would you consider being my career coach?" And
that's great. Yeah. So, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and back to what we were saying earlier. So I was at a basketball game and there was a drum line during halftime. It was unreal. I've never seen a drum line before, and I thought, okay, why isn't this high school drum line going in every elementary school showing these kids? Because I kind of hear about, there's not like a ton of kids maybe in band or the arts, and well, maybe 5th graders need to see that, or even my 2nd graders. If my 2nd graders saw that, I think half of them would go get drum lessons right now. So I think your daughter should be in a classroom telling kids about her job. Like, I feel like we sometimes get stuck into, okay, kids, you can be a fireman or a lawyer, or
well, exactly.
You can be one of 10 jobs.
Yeah.
And you have to go to college, but really you don't. Like, there's so many things you could do.
Yeah. I just wrote my daughter a piece called Art and the Anxious Mind, and it's an essay. Oh. And one of the lines in it is, no one can talk you into a profession, but a lot of people can talk you out of one. And they will talk you out of the arts because you'll never make a living at it.
Oh, yes.
And, but if somebody is supposed to make art, then they should, because their mental health is tied into the making of the art. And trust me, if they're supposed to make art, they will make a living at it. It may take a little while, but they'll keep working it until they find what it is the audience wants from them. And so I think we're missing out by not encouraging more children to follow the arts. And, of course, both my husband and I are artists. And so we like to promote that whenever we can. And we look at the money that's spent on football helmets and we think, please, if only they would spend that kind of money on instruments in the band room or education for these children to make art. There are ceramic kilns sitting at schools unused because they think it's too expensive to teach art. And that's very unfortunate because that's what some young people are supposed to do with their lives.
But you're right. I feel like that first barrier, how are you going to make a career out of this?
Right.
Stops so many people dead in their tracks.
Yeah. And from people that don't necessarily understand what it takes or the joy that comes from doing something like that. And the fact that artists don't always relate to the world in any way other than through their creativity. So at one point, I've never forgotten this, I was talking to a woman in Concrete who was setting up a gifted and creative group, how to approach children that were gifted and created. And she said her son was an artist, and she pointed at a chair and she said, when he looks at something like that, I say, what do you see? And he says, I see dark and I see light.
Oh.
He doesn't see a chair.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He sees shadows, because that's what his creative mind is doing with it. And when our children were in elementary school, we volunteered every year in the classrooms. And actually, you can see tile projects that we made with the kids all around the concrete elementary school. And often, the most difficult child in the classroom would end up standing right next to my husband saying, "I could do this all day, Mr. Murray." Mm-hmm. And the teacher would ask, "How did you calm him down?" And my husband would say, "Well, I'm talking to a part of his brain that nobody's spoken to before." Mm-hmm. And so, but I think, again, it comes back to teaching. They teach the teachers that you don't want to teach art, you know, and that's unfortunate, because there are some people that are very gifted at teaching art, and that's what they should do. Anyway,
it's all about exposure, I think, too. Yeah. Just exposing your kid to everything you possibly can. My buddy Al always talked about. He would talk about getting kids in the outside in the garden, like just physically getting your hands in the dirt, and how that positively affects you. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And also, again, whose mind do you open up to the possibility of becoming a farmer or just growing their own garden?
But I can just hear, a kid saying, "I want to be a farmer," and all I can hear is all the adults going, "You can't be a farmer these days. It doesn't pay. You can't.
Right.
You can't do it."
And then you watch Jeremy Clarkson on Clarkson's Farm, and he's a big TV personality in England.
Is he? Okay.
And during COVID, when he couldn't work on television, his farmer quit on his 650-acre farm in the Cotswolds. So he decided to go and be a farmer. And his journey through it is hilarious.
Wow.
But what's better than the hilarity is the fact that it really touched his soul to learn what it took to be a farmer, how hard it was, and yet he couldn't have been happier. He says, "This is the happiest thing I've ever done with my life."
Wow.
So think about that.
That's
there are
amazing.
ways of being paid that don't have a lot to do with money, which, yes, I understand everyone's going to say, "Well, how do we pay the bills?" But you find ways. If this is what you're supposed to do with your life, then you do it.
And that's the thing, is like everyone has that inside of them, and you're denying your gift, you're denying the world. Like there's someone out there that needs to either hear what you have to say or listen to your music or, see your art.
Right. My husband always says a gift is only a gift if you give it to others. Right? So if you have the gift of creating or making music or writing, then you're being selfish if you don't share that.
One of my friends shared, he's a musician, he shared a clip recently online. I think it was from John Cougar Mellencamp. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah, I do.
And he talked about how when he's not creating, it's like he gets sick.
Sure.
He physically gets sick, and he sort of invents like things that are wrong with him because he's not sharing his gift. And it really makes you think about our society.
Right.
And how, what if everyone just didn't care what other people thought? Because I think that holds people back a lot.
Right.
And they weren't concerned about the money, and they just did what was in their heart and what they're supposed to do. I don't know. Maybe we wouldn't have as many health problems. Like that's, I don't know.
Absolutely.
It's interesting to think about that.
I shared Art and the Anxious Mind with my editor, and he said, "I think every psychologist in the country should read this."
Yeah.
Because there really is a connection between your mental health and being creative. Your muse wants to be heard. And if you're denying the muse, then she's going to be fractious in other ways.
Do you know the artist Stephen Pressfield?
No.
He has, writer. He has a book called The War of Art. And he talks about resistance and how there's this force called resistance that's preventing you from finishing your art, finishing your book, from doing your work. It's such a great book. It's very practical, but he talks about how when he sits down, he reads a passage from, I think it's from the Iliad, and it's about the muse. So basically it's a prayer to the muse, help me while I write this, basically.
Yeah.
And he also has this one part near the end where he says, there's so many times when you're sitting there going, well, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like my friend was sharing this giant project that he wants to do, but I don't know how to do this and this. I said, just stop, just do the first thing, just write it.
Right.
After that, it's like you picture all these muses, all these angels behind you going, we know what to do next. You
Right.
just have to do the first step, and then we'll tell you what to do.
And it's exactly right. You put something down on the page, then the rest of the day, whether you're baking or going for a walk or working in your garden or cleaning the floor, the muse is saying, how about saying it this way?
Oh, yes.
Right? Or how about saying it
Or
that
they'll
way?
introduce you to someone that knows how to do
Yeah.
that thing that you don't know what to,
Right.
Something
Right.
will connect. You have to take that first step and just do it.
Well, and you're right. There's a book by Annie Lamott called Bird by Bird.
Oh my
right?
gosh, I love that book.
Right? And she says that her brother at one point had to do a paper on birds, and he had left it till the last minute, and this was a school paper, and he said to his father, I don't know how to do it. I don't know where to start. I don't know, there's so many birds out there. And his father's reply was, bird by bird, son. Bird by bird, And that's exactly right. If you put some words down on the page, they will start swimming in your mind. I just wrote a short story, that I thought I wanted to do it from one angle and started it and stalled. Thought I wanted to do it from another, started it and stalled. Tried a third time, but then all those things started to swirl in my mind, if you will, when I was doing other things, and all of a sudden the solution came to me.
Wow.
Right? And that's the muse talking to me. I've fed it, and then they've put it in order.
And those ideas were all in your head, but you have to put them down.
Yes.
You have to get them out to see them properly.
Yes, exactly right.
Kind
It's
of like the playwright, You can't see it on the page, but when people say it.
Right.
Right.
Or it's also like somebody making a quilt. You have all these squares of materials, and it's not until you put them down on the floor that you can start to see the pattern that you want to create with them, right?
Yeah.
So creativity is definitely the hardest part, is the first part, the first step, because it's work. And it's not just fun, it's work. But once you've got that hard part down, you've got something that you can look at, then it becomes fun. Oh, I know how to do this. Oh, I know what order to put it in. And I have found that editing my work has become the most enjoyable part.
Yeah.
Anymore.
Do you have a lot of people who edit your work, or do you?
I have a couple. A fellow called Jerry Ziegler, who discovered me in the shop before I wrote How to Make a Pot in 14 Easy Lessons, which was my first novel.
Oh, okay.
And it's a relationship story.
Wait, it's a novel?
It's a novel
called How to Make a Pot in 14 Steps.
14
Okay.
Easy Lessons.
Okay.
And it's really about a relationship building.
Oh.
But you see it also, the building of a pot is a metaphor for building a relationship.
Wow.
Right? What does it take to put into a relationship? And he was in my shop. He'd come out to visit a relative in Anacortes. He's from Wisconsin.
Oh.
He was the editor-in-chief for the Milwaukee Journal in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And we got chatting about writing, and I told him what I was working on, and he said, here's my card. I'll edit that for you.
That's awesome.
And a year went by, and I hadn't sent anything to him because I just got the idea of how I was going to format in these 14 easy lessons. Each chapter was going to be a lesson. And that idea had just come to me, so I wasn't really very far into it. And a year later, he turned up in my shop again and didn't introduce himself, but I kind of recognized him, and he was with his wife and his grandniece. And I finally said, aren't you the editor? And he said, yes. I said, I was so new to it then. I'm sorry I haven't sent you anything, but I'm 6 chapters in now. And he gave me his flash drive and said, load it onto my flash drive right now. So then I couldn't back away from it. And he was a very positive, again, almost like a writing coach. Great chapter. And then he would give me pointers on what I could change. And then he'd say, can't wait for the next one. And,
that's awesome.
And then I also work with an editor here in the Valley called Kirsten Colton, and she's very, very good.
How did you meet her?
Through the farm in Birdsview. Actually, her husband was farming there, and I went to a party, and we sat and chatted, and I sent her one of my Callum Lang mysteries. I also write mysteries set up on Sauk Mountain. I have a detective who lives in a yurt on Sauk Mountain. He's from New York City, and he moved there to get away from crime, and then he got sucked right back in. Right? And those are novellas. And she helped me with that, and we have built our relationship from there. And then I have first readers. So I have people that I share my work with when it's early, so they can give me pointers on what does and doesn't work, or what they prefer or don't prefer.
Oh, okay.
Critical feedback.
Yeah. And how many are in that series? The detective
In the
series?
detective series, I have 4 at the moment. And I have been inspired now for a full-length one that I really want to write, but I'm writing the novel of my play about the ladies from Texas.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, wow.
So that's what I'm working on right now.
Yeah.
And a children's book. So.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking to my friend Anthony. He's an artist, and he does all my tattoos as well. And we were talking about how he has a job, full-time job. He pours concrete during the day. And then when he gets home, he does his art. And he goes, because we were talking about how him and I both have like a pretty strong work ethic. And I said, well, when you work really hard, it feels good when you finally relax. And then we realized, wait, we don't relax.
Right.
This is
I'm
actually
like that.
how I relax.
Yeah.
Are you also the same way?
I'm very much a busy bee. Yes. I'm
like
very
the
much.
sauna is great. And I'll do that sometimes, in yoga.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's so much that I want to get out.
Yeah.
And so much our world is amazing. I can't lay on the couch and.
Right. I can't scroll through social media. I have to use social media because it's a good way to promote stuff. And because in all truth, I like seeing, friends with their posts of their children or something like that. And so I get a certain amount of pleasure, but I cannot do more than about 5 or 10 minutes of it because it drives me nuts. I've got to be up on my feet. I've got to be moving around. And sometimes when I'm writing and I stall like that, I've just got to get up and go and vacuum the floor or arrange the shop for the pottery or run errands.
When I run, I feel like I did a 50K yesterday. That's why I'm not walking very well. But when I was running, all I kept thinking about, I listened to a couple edits or a couple rough podcasts I need to edit. So that was nice because it gave me a clear head as to, okay, what I need to take out and this and that. Oh, I got to turn that down there. But when I run, that's when I do my best thinking.
Yeah. Oh,
so do you have what's your thing?
I walk every day. I have 2 dogs, and I tend to take them on a walk, usually up
just
at Rockwood State Park.
Oh, okay.
We go in and we take the Evergreen Trail.
Nice.
And it's funny, I'll go in with something on my mind that I'm trying to figure out in the story, and then my mind will drift other places, oftentimes to nothing related to that story or whatever I'm working on.
Yeah.
And then towards the end of the walk, the answer comes to me, how I'm supposed to solve it. And I wonder, this is me, the fanciful writer, I wonder if the trees took the information from me and passed it through their social network of roots.
Oh, I love that.
Right? And came up with an answer to give me by the end. Why don't you try this? And I can't say that that's wrong.
Yeah.
Because I think the trees are communicating with us. I believe in the telepathic communication too. One time, my friend Michael Brondy, who's very big in the Concrete Farm to School program, was in my kitchen talking to me about how physicists say there is no empty space. All around us is filled with molecules. And so consequently, when we move, we're displacing molecules, which may displace somebody further away because we displace the molecules in the airspace.
Okay.
Right? Do you understand what I'm saying? Well, of course, that idea totally rang with me. I had to write a play. And I wrote a series of plays called the Soul Plays, which are about our connections or disconnections from our souls. Okay?
Based on that conversation?
No, I had already started that. This was going to be another one. These are 1-act plays with minimal set requirements. And I was thinking, easy production value. And I asked myself, how can I communicate that? So in the first moments, I imagined 2 people playing a video game and being able to communicate telepathically. And then that didn't work for me. And then I thought of something else. And I was going around and around, and I decided there was a rift in our family. And I knew that the 2 parties that were rifting really wanted it to get better. So I thought, what if I use that as the basis for the story, right? And they're communicating via their minds with their thoughts, right? Somehow, have you ever had that phenomenon where you think about your Auntie Joyce and you haven't talked to her for 3 years, and all of a sudden the phone rings and it's your Auntie Joyce?
It happens with my sister all the time.
Right. Everybody's had that experience. How did that happen? Is it that we're communicating telepathically? So I decided that would be the crux of the story. But then I didn't know how to make us be able to see the communications. And then I was in Peter Pan at the Lincoln Theatre with Theatre Arts Guild. And the director said something about Nana, the dog. The dog will have heard you coming down the road. Actually, she probably heard you before you even turned into the road. And I thought to myself, that's it. Dogs can hear the telepathic communications.
Oh.
What if this rift between the brother and the sister, the brother had passed on and gifted his dog to his sister because the dog was full of all his love.
Oh.
And he wanted it. So then I'm not trying to
sweet.
rectify the situation between the two people.
Yeah.
Right? It's over with.
Yeah.
And so I wrote this play called The Gift. And I forget how we got onto that subject, but
we were talking about you were saying when you walk in Rockport.
Oh, that's right. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
So who's to say that the trees aren't one of those communicators too, of the thoughts that somehow get released into the ether through the mind, and then they pick them up and they talk amongst themselves and, oh, maybe she could try this, or maybe she could try that.
Well, that reminds me of, I watched this documentary on Netflix about mushrooms.
Sure.
Oh my gosh. And the root system,
yes,
and
absolutely.
how they all talk to each other. It was mind blowing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
mycelium, the
mycelium.
Connections under the ground. Well, it was in the 70s, I think, that somebody started talking about, a scientist started talking about how trees communicated. Now, I think probably the native people have known that for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. But they started talking about it because of reforesting clear cuts, and they couldn't understand why they would replant it in a monoculture because that's what they wanted to have grow, and the trees would die. Well, they didn't realize that within the forest, the cedars are communicating with the maples and the alders, and they're all working to protect each other from disease.
Oh, wow.
Right? It's really pretty fascinating. What's the name of that book? The Mother Tree, Finding the Mother Tree.
Okay. By
Suzanne Simard. And she started, for her university degree, she discovered that they must be communicating through the fungus.
Wow.
Right? And she started putting that out there, and people shot her down and called her names and, tried not to listen to her because they wanted to grow monocultures. They didn't want to be informed that there was another way to do this. So
yeah. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it's a great book.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed yesterday when I was trying to make my way through the Chuckanuts, there were times when I would really rely on trees to get myself up or down, or just take a break. And I remember just stopping and just putting my hand on the bark and just, okay, give me some energy.
It's like that story I told you I read for Read Across America. Breathe.
Yeah.
That's all the tree was telling you.
Yeah.
Breathe. Yeah. And giving you the potential to do that.
Yeah. That was actually, speaking of breathing, I probably had, there's one section of the race where it's called Chin Scraper, and it's, I kid you not, it's straight up for a mile. And I was having panic attacks the whole time. I had to keep stopping and just really taking a breath. I had run the race 5 years ago, but at mile 20, where the bottom of Chin Scraper, there was an aid station, and I was only 3 minutes from the cutoff. I could have grabbed something to eat and just started up, but I said, I'm done. I was crying. Mentally, it was my first ultra. So mentally, I was not prepared for, oh, my knee hurt. I didn't know that I could just keep going,
right?
Despite the knee pain. And so I quit. And they, you have 3 minutes left. You could keep going. No, get me out of here. So I stopped. And so it was really emotional to get to that aid station and realize, oh my gosh, I have an hour? This is great. And then I went up Chin Scraper, and I walked around the corner, and I just cried for about a minute before I went up. But that, it's called a DNF when you pull out of a race. That DNF is the reason why I'm here.
Oh.
So when I DNF'd, Dan Probst was the lead of that aid station. And he said, well, if you want to wait a few minutes, I mean, you're the last one, so we're going to break this down, and I can drive you to your car, because we had to park at Western. And I was like, okay, sure, whatever. So I sat there, cold and waiting. And so got into his car, and he drove me to the aid station. Well, 2 months before that race, I had watched the Mountain Runners documentary.
Sure.
And I don't know if you remember watching the Mountain Runners, Olive, when you were little, but my mouth was open the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, this is from our area?
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't there post billboards? And I was blown away. I couldn't believe that this race had happened. Anyway, I actually was looking for a book on ultra running at the library, and I saw the call number. I went, in the stacks, and I found it. And I said, "This is a DVD, not a book." Oh well, I'll just watch it. That's how I found the documentary.
Oh.
So when I met Dan, he's driving to my car, and I said, "Oh, so what do you do?" And I'm the race director for this race I'm trying to start up. It's called the Mount Baker Ultra. And I said, "Oh, like the one from 1911?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just, trying to start it back up. And I said, I need to help. I need to be a part of this. And so I volunteered for a few years. And then last year was like really awesome. It was, the first time it was at Jeremy's, we did registration right out front of the model, which is beside the hub.
Right.
And then he had a little, a couple things inside the hub. And so I was there all 3 days. I love that race so much. I love helping Dan out. And so that's where I met Jeremy. And I said, there's something happening here. Like, this is pretty cool. And then I said, can I host trivia at your bar? Even though I've never done that before. And so I did that. And then, and then that was my whole summer bartending there. And it was awesome. So looking back, that DNF 5 years ago, it's amazing to think, I thought that was the end. That's it. I'm not going to be an ultra runner. I can't finish one race. I ended up finishing one 3 months later, and I've done several since then. But at the moment, it was just soul crushing, and I didn't think that, okay, this is it. I'm done. And then look what it led to.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
good for you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Then actually, so I did the early start. I was supposed to finish by 4:00, and I rolled in about 4:25, and I said, I don't care. Don't give me a medal. Put DNF on my ultra sign up online. I finished the race. I did not get pulled off the course. I'm going to take the win for myself.
Yeah.
And I'm never
absolutely.
doing this stupid race ever again.
Yeah. And that is a good message about pretty much anything in life. If you're being creative in whatever way it is, whether you're creating with the plants out in the garden, or whether you're writing or making pottery or whatever, sometimes it just has to be about how it makes you feel inside, rather than any success you may or may not get from it. You don't need the kudos. What we need to do is be able to get up every day and face the day with a smile, right?
Yeah.
And if you've got something that lures you, draws you, compels you to keep going back to it, you're smiling.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a little frustrated at times, like that first race when you couldn't quite get to the end of it, but it kept pulling on you.
Yeah.
Something good happened to you in that very first race because you came back to it and said, okay, I'm going to try one more time.
Yeah.
Just one more time. And then look where it led to how many times.
Well, and I was physically ready for that race 5 years ago. Mentally, not ready. I didn't know what to do.
Right.
But now, this race, I didn't train at all.
That may have
it's
been
really hard for me to run in the dark. And so I was not physically trained at all, but mentally, I killed it. So that's the only reason why I finished, which is my mental game.
Absolutely. Have you ever read The Oatmeal? The Terrible, Awful Reasons Why I Run Marathons.
Yes, Matt Inman. I love him.
Yeah, that's a great
yeah.
presentation, and on many different things. I mean, across the years, sometimes when we were in our early years of the pottery business, we'd meet people that were making way more money than us, and yet they were quitting because it wasn't a real salary, right?
Wow.
And we would look at them and think, right? But we just kept going, and long term it worked. Longevity pays off. If you keep doing something, not only will you get better at it, but people will keep coming back to you.
I really want to put an Airbnb on our pasture. We live in Cedar Woolley. We have this amazing view of this hill in the back, and I mainly want to do it to meet people from all around the world, to come in, and hey, maybe I'll record a podcast with them too. I was just thinking, with your studio, we meet
lots of people,
and you have the time to chat with them and hear their story.
Well, yes, and that's one reason why I love my day job, which is my day job is selling the pottery, because I do get to meet fantastic people, and many of those people are in my first novel, How to Make a Pot in 14 Easy Lessons. So what happened was I had been taking notes on my husband's wood firing for a number of years, and I was writing plays, and then I decided I wanted to write a novel, which somebody had recommended I try, and I, what do I know about novel writing, right? But I wanted to write about his wood firing because there's very little written about wood-fired kilns, and it's a tradition that's been passed down for centuries.
So what's the alternative to that?
Gas or electric.
Oh, okay.
And most people fire with gas or electric. Stephen, when he moved here in 1975, saw there was an abundance of waste wood from the shake mill industry.
Oh.
And he at one point watched them pushing waste wood into a crevasse on a piece of property that they just purchased for that reason, to dump their waste wood on.
Oh my God.
And he said to himself, I can turn that into something. I can make something of that. So he taught himself to be a wood-firing potter. So I wanted to write about that. But I'm not a technical writer. And what I found myself wanting to write about were these cool people that I'd met through the shop. And I was talking to a customer at Tulip Festival, actually, one year, and her husband was a writer for Microsoft, and she was a part-time potter at Kirkland Community Art Center. And she said, why don't you make each chapter a lesson in some aspect of your husband's pottery and have these people wander in?
Wow.
And that's what it turned into. But we have met some incredibly wonderful people. And I just mentioned to my son, so one of the characters is called Sol, and he's based on a fellow we met who, I'm going to tell you this story. I hope it's appropriate. You can use it or not use it. It's up to you.
Okay.
But he came into the shop and fell in love with the pottery and kept coming back and buying more of it. And over time, he became a friend, which happens to a lot of our customers, and shared with us that he had 7 sons. None of them were his biologically. He'd been married for 25 years, and the marriage hadn't worked after 25 years. And he didn't have any papers on them, but they were his. And what do you mean by that? He said, well, the first one, I was down in Bogota. He was a petroleum geologist in Bogota, South America.
Wow.
And Colombia. And was feeling sorry for himself because his marriage had come to an end, and was walking around the streets feeling sorry for himself. And a young man came up to him, a street urchin, and offered to have sex with him for money. And our friend Don said, no, don't want to have sex with you, but I'll buy you a cup of coffee. So he took him into a diner and bought him a meal and got chatting with this young man and discovered that he was the most interesting young man. And he said to him, if you could be anything, what would you be? And he said, I'd be a doctor. So he paid for him to go to medical school in the United States.
Oh my gosh.
And all 7 of his sons, it was that kind of story.
Wow.
That he helped them pick up their lives from being street urchins and transform into something. And what he did was he grew himself a family.
Wow.
As a result, right? People that cared about him. He would go and stay with one son and their children who were now his grandchildren.
That's amazing.
It is an inspiring story, isn't it?
Wow.
And so that was the kind of thing I had to put in my novel, because I think it is inspiring for people. So.
Yeah. And when I'm just thinking, so when you write about, I guess I'm just asking for myself, because I've thought about, I really want to write about people I meet at the Concrete Liquor Store. I love working there, and it's not super busy. So when they come in, I can chat for 20 minutes sometimes. And the stories that I hear.
Yeah.
So when you write about someone, do you just change the name and change a couple details? So, or do you have to ask the person? I guess legally, how does that work?
No, you can change. I change the gender sometimes and change the name of the person.
Oh, okay.
And then you can put a disclaimer in the front of the book. None
so
of
does
this
this
is based
person
on
know that?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
They might read it and then say, oh, I recognize myself there. But most of the time people don't recognize themselves, because you can change quite a bit about them.
Oh, okay.
Their physique. And, or you can put that story in the mouth of another character if you want to.
Speaking of another character.
Yes.
Steve just walked in.
Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Steve. How are you? Stephen, this is my daughter, Olive. I don't know if you remember her from the trivia night. Yeah, that was fun.
Which we got robbed of, right?
I forget. There was a tie. Were you guys third place?
I
were
think
third
we were
place.
5th place or
were
something.
You?
I don't know.
Okay.
We didn't. Well, there were those 2 fellows that had watched.
Age of 1977. There really weren't
very many people firing with wood. And what I think we'll find is that people will get, and I've run into this with people, oh, we're going to build a wood-fired kiln. And I ask them, where's your source of fuel? Oh, we'll figure that out later. and that's like not really the way to do it.
Yeah.
And people come to realize that it's a lot like work. It's very similar to work. So you got to really love it to do it. And I've done it alone. I just told somebody the other day, they were shocked that I've done it alone for all these years.
Yeah.
And I just can't envision consigning my work to somebody else.
Yeah.
Oh, here, you ruin it. If I ruin it, then it's my fault. I can't say anything to you if you ruin it. Oh, well, gee.
Is this the only place that you sell your pottery?
We do, we do probably 75% out of the little room in front.
Okay.
And
do you go to markets or
no? That's no. There's a lot of hidden costs in doing that sort of thing.
Well, she was saying your busy times are the weekends, so it's like, why would you go all the way out to a market when you just open up your shop here?
Right.
Yeah.
And you look at all the successful predators. What's probably the most successful predator? The spider.
Okay.
Okay, that was a semi-rhetorical question. But the spider, what does the spider do? Make something attractive and hang out, right?
I like
some
that.
Some fool falls into it and lunch. And so it just so happens, via mistake, I made an interesting looking building. Okay? I'm not an architect. I drew the first time I drew the house was on the hood of my pickup truck when somebody asked me what it was going to look like. And I said, it'll look kind of like this. And I drew it on the hood, and that is what I had in my mind. And some of my most fun times building things have been when I had all the little parts in my head. And then, like the chicken coop, everything works in that stupid chicken coop. And it has worked for years and years and years. And my son, when he was about 5, helped me build that. And
wow.
So consequently, he dug the dirt and fooled around, but he was there, and it's functioned all these years. He's 32 now. So.
Yeah, she said when you bought this property, nothing was here, just one shack or something.
It was roughly 5 acres of forest, and the farmer had been letting his livestock graze over to the creek.
Okay.
And so that acted as a fence line.
Huh.
And it's a little guy like me that's doing firewood.
Yeah.
Once in a while, I'll find a log that is worth some money. And the thing about me is every time I've sold a log to somebody, because years ago I used to sell electric guitar blanks. Because the electric guitars, they would buy a 2 1/4 inch thick by 9 inch wide by 24 inch block of wood with figure in it.
Yeah.
And then they'd rip that in half and make the face of an electric guitar.
Oh, okay.
And every time I'd sell one of those blanks, I regretted it.
Really?
Oh man, this is too beautiful to sell. And so consequently, I've got a lot of figured wood.
Yeah.
And I'll sell some of it. My neighbor Royden will come over, and he's a retired guy, but he's a furniture maker, and he'll go through the whole pile, and get the piece he wants, and then stack it all back up and give me some money for it. And the way he goes, he's a happy guy.
So is that you started doing all like woodwork first, and then you got into pottery?
No, I went to art school I grew up in the Adirondack Mountains of New York State and went to art school.
Is that where you're born?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And went to art school in Cleveland, Ohio, at a little commercial art school, which basically was like a trade school.
Okay.
It didn't offer a degree. It was like you'd finish there, and if you wanted a degree, you'd go do 2 years of prereq at community college and have a bachelor's, I never did that. So that wasn't important to me. But it was a feeder school for Hallmark greeting cards, American greeting cards.
Oh.
And so consequently, they sent all sorts of illustrators and watercolorists to do stuff like that little greeting card there with the mountains.
Oh,
and
yeah.
boom, boom, boom. And now that's all independent. But back in the 70s, there weren't very many greeting card companies out there.
Yeah.
With the advent of printing technology and computer technology, it's like any idiot can make greeting cards.
So then how'd you get from Cleveland to here?
Well, I was at school at a thing called a creative lock-in. So you'd go in on Friday and they'd quote unquote lock the doors, order in pizza, and you'd stay there all weekend. And
Really?
people would be doing
That's fascinating.
silk screen prints. They'd be doing intaglio. They'd be doing lithographs. They'd be doing paintings. They'd be doing sculptures. They'd be doing all this very cool creative stuff.
What's the idea behind locking you in? Like, what's
Well,
that?
you're there for the weekend. You make
Okay.
this commitment. You're going to live art for the weekend,
Wow,
right?
that's
Instead
cool.
of running around the streets drinking beer and chasing around. And so one of the sculptors, and learn something new. At the creative lock-ins, I learned about silkscreen. I helped people pull lithographs.
Oh, so when you're not doing your art,
Yeah,
you're
you're
basically
just,
walking
what
around
do you-
helping people looking. Yeah.
What are you doing?
Interesting.
And so,
I like that.
It was a learning, it was very much for me a learning experience. So this one of the sculpture teachers brought a potter's wheel and sat down and did a demonstration, and all these giggly girls were watching me do it. And I was working on a painting. And out of the back of my head, I was watching them. And after a while, they all lost interest and went away. And I felt like I needed a break, so I sat down at the potter's wheel and proceeded to, first time at bat, throw a cylinder. And I undoubtedly it was the clay that was well mixed and all ready to go. And I get this cylinder, not much really, but I get this cylinder, and this pretty lady comes up and says, "I've been trying to do that my whole life, and I can't do that." And I'm like, "Oh shit!
You have a gift.
I can do something that other people can't do." And pretty girls come up and talk to me. This is a double win. At art school, I'll tell you, you have to be pretty insensitive to go to art school and not be humbled.
Really?
Because there were people that would wake up with the worst hangover in the world to make better art than me. And for me to be able to do something that... And Norma, this young woman, was a wonderful painter. And she had beautiful line quality, really, really gifted person in the arts.
Yeah.
Anyways,
so then how did you get here?
Well,
From...
I met her father.
Oh, okay.
Her father was a ceramic engineer.
Oh.
And he was my mentor for about 3 years. He couldn't throw either.
In Ohio?
There must be something about the Germans. They don't
What
know
does
how
that
to
mean,
throw.
you can't throw?
Well, that's what they call it. Is you put the clay on the wheel and you throw the clay onto the wheel. So it leaves your hand and then hits the wheel. It's not like you place it on the wheel.
Oh.
I don't know why they call. There's some pretty antiquated terms. What's a kiln? You know,
Like an oven?
Where did that word come from? Right? And
okay.
And you fire the pots.
Mm-hmm.
How do you fire the pots in an electric kiln? There's no flame.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
And anyway, so there's all these
So you met
kind
him.
of things that grist for the mill, thought-wise.
So you met him, and then he...
Yeah, and he, I was kissing his daughter, so he didn't like that part. But he took me under his wing. And he worked at the biggest brick and tile factory in the United States, Summitville Tile in East Canton, Ohio. And he opened my eyes to this whole world that I had no idea existed. Where does a brick come from? Whoever thinks about where
Never
a brick
thought
comes
about
from?
that.
And so I found out
Yeah.
where a brick came from. And I just got really into it, and Norma and I decided we would go set up a pottery because she worked. I would throw the shapes and she would decorate the shapes. And that was going to be our pitch, our thing.
Yeah.
And so we got in a car and started looking for a place to set up a pottery, and stumbled on this 5 acres that was for sale.
Oh, wow. From
And-
Ohio to here, yeah.
Say it?
From Ohio to here.
Yeah, we had gone across.
Wow.
It was 1970 at art school that I was good, capable at sculpture.
Right.
And so ceramics actually is creating things in 3 dimensions, i.e. sculpture. Okay? So I started making pots, and after that first pot, it took me like 6 months to make another pot.
Yeah.
I bought a kick wheel kit. I built a kick wheel. I tried and tried and tried and tried and tried and tried and tried, and finally started making rudimentary shapes, I would say. I'm watching my son go through that now. It takes a long time before you start to refine the shape that's in your mind, or that you've seen someplace. Anyways, I went to Cleveland State University and took ceramics for 1 calendar year. Started as an advanced student and ended as independent study. It was pass or fail, and I never got a grade. I have no idea what I did, but they didn't throw me out. And, it was $85 a quarter or something.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Oh, no.
I just have to put a little addendum in here. He went to Cleveland State, and he was the only student the teacher would not give a key to the room to, because he knew he'd be in there all hours making pots. So Stephen broke a lock on one of the windows and used to climb in through the window at 6 o'clock in the morning so he could sit and throw for a while.
Oh,
and
my
practice.
gosh. That's
But,
passion.
right? And that's where I get my stories from, that kind of thing. Sorry.
No, he was telling me about
Cleveland.
He was telling me about the lock-in, how they would lock them in for the weekend and just do art, and I love that. Yeah.
It was cool. It was great fun, and we did eat copious pizza and Coca-Cola and that sort of thing.
Well, in one of Stephen Pressfield's other books, he talks so much about how do you write a book? You sit in your chair and you write it. Like you have to sit down and get it done. Do the work, and so.
And it's the same with being a potter or any solo practice. You have to show up. You have to show up with the willingness to do the work.
Even if you don't know where it's going,
right?
Show up
you
and
have
start.
To make a start.
Just
You
start.
Make a start. And so I have in my life discovered that I kind of abhor loose ends, and it drives me wild to have a loose.
Yeah.
Well, that's one loose end that's still out there,
I was telling Nicola, I work at the liquor store in Concrete on Saturdays, and I love it. And the people I meet, it's just so fascinating. But one that's just stuck out so much, this guy said that he has written 6 books, but he's never finished any of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's broke my heart more than anything. And I said,
and it's not uncommon. Anybody can start an art project. It's very few can finish. And that's the difference. That's a big difference.
That's one thing I told Maya. Maya came to me wanting me to write a reference letter for when she applied to university. And in the reference letter, I said the most impressive thing was she was 13 years old and finished the project.
She followed through.
She followed through and has something to show at the end of it. And then did another one when she was 16.
Yeah.
And that's the tough part for a lot of people.
It really is. Yeah. Olive just gave a presentation to the Burlington Rotary Club on Friday morning before school, and she talked about her book. She has 2 published books on Amazon,
Cool.
called The Pickle and The Pickle Sequel. And so she did a slideshow on how to write a book. It was really interesting. I actually I forgot about the last slide until she showed me the night before, and it's my favorite. And she said, she talked about all the steps on how to write a book. And at the end, she said, and this is the most important part, no matter what, you have to finish. And I was like, oh,
Yeah,
yes, I
it's
love
tough,
that.
isn't it?
I love that she's 10 and she knows that in her head. Like, no matter what you start, even if
gotta
maybe you don't like it, or you think maybe it's not the best, just finish it. Yes.
Yeah, and then you can unencumbered go on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. That's a big thing now I can go on to the next thing.
Because otherwise it's nagging on your heart, like what you haven't finished. And I think about that guy in his 6 books all the time. I hope he comes back in with, because I said, hey, don't worry about the 6 you haven't finished. Pick one and just finish it. Mm-hmm. Please bring it in. I'll read it. Just the one.
Sure. And it could be the great American novel.
It could. Yes, I know.
Possible.
Yeah.
Just America.
Yeah. I think we'll end on that now.
Okay.
Well, thanks, Nicola.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Steve.
You bet.
All right.